In this video, we are going to be reviewing navigating Odoo. Now, there are several ways to get to specific menu items or applications within Odoo. So if you're just looking to open an application, of course, you can select the application from your main dashboard. From there, you can use the menu items to jump to the specific data that you are hoping to review, in this case, products. However, there is also a faster way to get to specific sets of records or menu actions within Odoo, which is to search directly from the home screen. So once you're on your main dashboard, simply start typing and you will see all menu items that have the term that you are searching for included in them, at which point you can select the one that is of interest to you and hit enter. Another thing to note about Odoo is that as you navigate around, you will end up with breadcrumbs along the top of your screen. These breadcrumbs are the records that you have navigated through to get to where you currently are. So to make good use of navigating around Odoo and these breadcrumbs, you should use these breadcrumbs to jump back and forth. A good reason for doing so is, for example, if we are on our products right here, we can limit what we would like to see to only those that are services and then remove the products filter. So now we are limited to 12 products of the type of service. So if I click on my cookies and I jump around to the units purchased, I can quickly go back to just my cookies and I will keep my fast pagination, which is just the records that were visible on my main list or Kanban view, essentially your filtered record set. And then I can also jump back to products and I still have my filtered record set. However, I can do the same thing by going to my cookies and then pressing my back button. And when I do that, I've lost the context I had on my record set. So I can no longer fast paginate through this set of records that I had filtered to on my products list, because by using my back button, I've lost this context. And additionally, if I were to do something else like refresh and go back out to products, I will have lost my filtered record set altogether, and now I'm just looking at the default record set when I would normally get when I load this view. So it's important to note that you should be using the breadcrumbs within Odoo and the navigation capacities within Odoo and not rely on habits that you may have gotten into when navigating other websites. Additionally, instead of needing to refresh to see new records as they are added, you really just need to hit the return button, say on the search view, to see those new records. So again, no need to refresh. All right, so now let's talk about some other aspects of navigating around Odoo, particularly around the filtering, grouping options, etc. So I'm going to load up our contacts here, and we'll actually see that I have a saved favorite that I'm using by default that we'll talk about here shortly, but I'm going to remove that for now. As we search, we will see that we have what I call fast search options. So what this will do is by selecting one of these, right, the default is going to be named. So if I hit that, then we're going to see all contacts that have the bakery, the word bakery in the name. But additionally, we could search for those that have the word bakery in their email address, their phone number, a tag, which we'll take a look at in future videos, or have the salesperson set as bakery. So in this way, without even needing to add filters, which we'll be touching on here momentarily, you have several quick search options. Beyond that, if you were to start typing, you will also see that some of these have little arrows next to them. And if you click those, then you will get essentially a filtered list of records that may match your search. So by clicking that drop down, you get to see a preview of what your results might return. And then you could choose just to select that as well to limit your search results. So speaking of filtering, we will see a filters icon here. Filters are used to filter a record set, just to limit the number of records you're viewing based on specific conditions. So let's talk about some of the default ones that we're seeing in contacts. Note that as you navigate to different apps and different record sets will have different default filters here because they have different things that are important to those apps or those sets of records. So I can limit to customer invoices, so those that have invoices, likewise those that have vendor bills. I could also limit to individuals, so just those contacts that are marked as being people and not companies. And people is a little ambiguous. We'll talk more about that when we talk about contacts and different ways that contacts are used within Odoo. And then we could also limit to companies, so just those contacts that are marked as being companies. And then, of course, archived. So archived are records that have not been deleted but are archives. They don't show up when you're generally navigating or searching through a record set, but you can still toggle the archive filter to see them. This is important because in certain contexts, you will not be able to delete records, and in fact, you wouldn't want to be able to delete records. For example, if you have a contact that is no longer a customer of yours, so you don't want to see them in your search results because it just increases the number of records that are returned that may not be relevant, you could choose to archive that contact because they may still have sale orders or transfers that not only would you not want to lose the history on, but Odoo ultimately protects you from losing that history as it should by preventing the deletion of records that are linked to important documents. Additionally, within our search, we can layer. So we could say bakery, Ella. And by doing that, we're saying it includes either the word bakery or the word Ella. Likewise, filters operate in a similar way when you add your custom filter. So custom filters are going to let you filter on a variety of fields within Odoo, not just the ones that are default. So in this case, we could choose to select city, and we could filter to those that are in Tampa, right? And these are the results that we will get out of that. I could also, if I wanted to, I could pair this with another filter. And when I do so, for example, select individuals, then we are saying the city contains Tampa and they are an individual. So this is an and statement. However, we could choose to do an or statement. So city contains Tampa, add a condition, or city contains. Again, you could do any filter. You don't have to have them be on the same field. We can say city contains Brooklyn. And now we're going to see records that match this or statement. So keep that in mind when using filters. You can use them in or situations or in and situations. You can also use grouping. So grouping allows you to group by specific fields. You have less options in your custom groupings than you do in your custom filters because you can't group by every field, but you still have access to group by quite a few of these. So By default, we can group by company or country or salesperson to see who the set salesperson is, if anybody. But we could also choose to do a grouping of the city, for example. And in Kanban view, you can only group by one thing at a time, or at least you'll only see this one level of grouping. So if we were to add another one and say group by salesperson, this doesn't actually change how we are viewing the data. However, in list view, which we will talk about in more detail here shortly, if we switch to that, then we really can do additional groupings, and it just kind of groups all the way down. So we have it by city and salesperson, and now we can also do is a company, for example. And when we do that, we'll be able to expand out these records. So in this case, the city of Tampa, we have one record where the salesperson is set here, and then we can see that is company is also true, right? So depending on the view that you are using, you will have more flexibility with your groupings. And then last but not least, let's talk about favorites. So we can go ahead and say city contains Tampa and city contains Brooklyn. Favorites are a good way to save a filtered and or grouped record set that you may use often or you may want others to use. So to save this, we would just click favorites and then save current search. We'll say Tampa and Brooklyn. And now we have a few options here. So we could save this search. And if we save this, then when we come back, we'll be able to click on our favorites and we will be able to access this favorite, which we will show momentarily. We can use by default, which is what I had set up and what we saw when we first landed on contacts. And we can share with all users. So when we save this, we're definitely saving it as a favorite that we can toggle on or off for ourselves, or rather just on. But in terms of using it by default or share with all users, you can only select one of these. So you can either use it by default for yourself or not use it by default, but then share it with all users. So in this case, we will say share with all users, which just means that anybody that could access this record set could use this favorite. So if we leave contacts and come back, this is our non-payroll private contacts. This is a save favorite that I am using by default for my user, but I can use the Tampa and Brooklyn save favorite that we just created as well, and that will change the record set that I am looking at. Now let's talk about some of the different views. So we'll talk about some of the views that are present here and then jump over into another application to look at the views that are present there. So there will often be overlap, but there are some views that are not available across all applications. The views that are available in an application are the views that are deemed to make the most sense given the context of the record set that you're looking at. And it's not even about the application, it's about the record set itself. So in this case, we can visualize this by, we have our Kanban right here. So a Kanban view is going to provide an image and it will provide some additional data that you can see at a glance. In the case of contacts, we're seeing their city and state, their email address, and any tags. Tags are ways to provide some additional data about a record by simply giving it a name and a color that will display on your Kanban view. Next, we have lists, which we already discussed, but lists are just that. A list view of all of the records. So we already talked about grouping on list views, but let's also talk about a few other things that we're going to see here. One of which are these three dots, which when clicked allow you to, at a user level, toggle on or off which columns you want to see in your list view. So in my case, I only care about the phone, the email address, and maybe the state, but I don't care about anything else. And so that gives me the flexibility to modify these columns as I see fit. Additionally, it's worth calling out while we're here that by default, we're seeing 1 to 80 records. However, I can click on this record set up here and I can change this number. So I can choose to view all of the record sets, or I can choose to change my starting and my ending number. And this is really helpful when you're using Odoo to know how to limit or increase the records that you see on a view. Next, we will take a look at our map view. Again, we can always increase the number of records that we're viewing here. And when we view a map view, what we're actually seeing are the records displayed in a geographic way. So in this case, we are seeing the addresses of the contacts that we have in our record set displayed on a map. And we can click on any of them to either open the contact, or if we go back, we can also choose to navigate to that address, which opens Google Maps and allows us to plan our route. Next up, we have our activity view, and our activity view is just showing us the activities that are scheduled on the record set and for what date they're scheduled and what type of activity they are. You can also quickly schedule an activity from here as well. Now let's move out of that and move into CRM to see some other view options. And we will see that we have a new icon here for our calendar view. Our calendar view allows us to easily see any meetings that are scheduled for our record set. So in this case, for my pipeline, we have one meeting scheduled this week. I also have a pivot view. The pivot view allows me to change the measures which I want to see. So in this case, I can say that I want to know the probability as well. So that's going to be an additional column. And then you can change your columns and rows. So by clicking the minus button, I removed what it was previously showing as a row. And now I can assign some different rows that I would like to see. And I can just keep going. So I can press the plus button again. And then I will get, say, country. They're all going to be United States. So at any point when you've added several kind of cascading rows, you may want to go ahead and click this button, which will expand out all of them. So that way you don't need to click each one to open them up. You can just expand it out. Likewise, for new columns, it works the same way. So you can simply add customer here, for example, and you will see kind of these nested columns. And we can, in this view, click this button right here to flip the axis and change our columns into rows and vice versa. We'll then take a look at some of our graph views. So here we have a bar chart, just like we were already talking about with other views. We can change the measures or filters, groups by, etc. Now that we are on our bar chart, but that's not the only chart that's available to us. And though do note you can hover over it to see some additional data about the counts on the bar chart. We can also change this to a line chart or a pie chart. And if we go back over here, then we can change it to descending, ascending, etc. And then we have the cohort view, which is used to correlate data over a period of time. And the only other view that we see here that we haven't talked about from the contacts is this dashboard view. So this dashboard view is the same view that you would get from going to reporting and clicking on, say, your pipeline, right? But ultimately, you can think of the dashboard or report view as the primary reporting kind of dashboard for this data. So the dashboard reports are what you would describe as kind of like Google Analytics style reports. So you have this overview of some information down here, as well as graphs. And if you scroll down, then you'll also see some pivot and cohort views, and you can manipulate these independently. So that way, when you land on the dashboard view, it has the data that is most important to you. While we're in here, also note, again, we have our filters, and comparisons also come in handy when you're on some of these views, as you can compare to previous periods, previous years, etc. Especially in the pivot view, where you can see a variation in how a measure has increased or decreased as compared to a previous period. And with that, hopefully you can see that most views in Odoo really can be used as reporting tools. Now, one more thing I want to talk about when talking through navigating around Odoo is the idea of smart buttons. So smart buttons allow you to quickly jump to records that are related to this record or linked in some way. So in the case of James Smith, if I click on events, I'm going to go to the list of events that James Smith is registered to attend. Likewise, if I hop out here and I go to Crazy for Candy, I can jump to related sales, tickets, etc. So between the filtering, the grouping, the smart buttons, etc., you have a lot of good ways to quickly navigate around Odoo, and the more comfortable you become with those different mechanisms, the more proficient of an Odoo user you will be. Also, you will note that any fields in Odoo that are required fields are indicated with a bold underline. So keep that in mind as you're navigating Odoo and creating new records, is that while in many cases it would be appropriate to have information, you are not necessarily required to provide the information in order to save the record unless it has a bold underline, in which case that is a required field. And last but not least, I want to talk around some of the menu items that you will see as it relates to your particular user. So of course, this is your user right here, and you can quickly jump to your own settings or log out. But you also have your activities view. So this count right here is going to include activities that are due today or were due in the past. In this case, we have one late one, and we can jump to that record set so we know what we need to action on. And you will see messages for your user or communications or notifications essentially. So you will only see these notifications accruing up here if you handle your notifications in Odoo. If you handle your notifications via email, then you will receive an email instead.